Welcome back, fellow defenders. We are here for a very special follow-up to our Luke Cage Season 2 coverage. Instead of doing our wrap-up on what we thought about the season, we were lucky enough to get a chance to sit down with the showrunner and creator of Luke Cage on Netflix, Cheo Hodari Coker, for a good hour and a half chat with him, all about his thoughts and about how he created the universe of Luke Cage, loads of other history about the things he's worked on in the past, some of the things he's got coming up in the future, and mostly his thoughts about Luke Cage, the show, and the people who are behind the scenes working on it, the cast, the crew, the writers. Some really, really interesting stuff in there that myself and John got to sit down and talk to him about.
Yeah, a really fantastic chat with Cheo Hodari Coker. And also, us being able to just listen to some really insightful stuff about the Marvel Netflix shows, and obviously focused around Luke Cage.
Yeah, and loads of other stuff, like Rocky's in there as well. Some great discussions about Rocky.
Yeah, Rocky, X-Men, loads of other different bits and bobs. Yeah. Just sprinkled throughout a really nice, relaxed and chilled chat with the showrunner of Luke Cage.
Hopefully you enjoy it, and let us know your thoughts. You can always email us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com with any thoughts that you have in any of our episodes. It'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, and of course, please subscribe to Defenders TV Podcast over on any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice.
Without further ado, let's get into it.
I'm holding back. Wow! You think I'm holding back? I'm out to save you.
Hello, Mr. Coker. It's Derek here. Can you hear me?
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Cool.
Hello, and it's John here. Love the Luke Cage t-shirt.
Hey, how you doing? You know what's funny? I'm actually laughing because I just happen to be wearing this t-shirt. I literally did not wear this t-shirt for this conversation, but we actually didn't mass produce these. We made enough for props on set.
Right.
Yeah. And I made sure there's a double XL one, and of course I just took it right off the top.
You got it.
It was one of the only few perks we actually have on the job.
Gotta have some t-shirts.
Did DW actually sell it to you as well from his shop?
No, well, actually, yeah, DW would have charged me, or he would have been really mad that I took one. But there are. But membership has its privileges, so to speak.
Absolutely. We'll kick off the interview with you, if that's all right.
All right, that's perfect. So just before we start, or we can start. Like I just have to just thank you guys, because listening to your podcast, you guys are so thoughtful in terms of even the things you argue about. So there are times where I'm like, wait, I want to call in and say this, I want to say that. we made this decision for this reason, and oh my God, they got this, and oh, they didn't get this, and it blows my mind, because it's almost as if you're in the writer's room. It's like these are the things that we talk about with this level of scrutiny, and so like it was really trippy for me listening to the finale podcast. I was like, oh my God, it's like A, like they're getting it all, and B, it's like, oh, I'm scared. Like I can't even talk, because if we do get a season 3, like they're going in directions like that we're talking about.
Oh,
like,
really?
Man, it's crazy. Like,
Yeah, we really enjoy discussing the Marvel Netflix shows, and obviously we really enjoyed Luke Cage. We take a bit of speculation, some theories. We like delving into the process of it, looking at the director, the actors, writers, and so on. How do you like to view Luke Cage as a series?
So I think the thing is that like there's only but so much plot. There are only but so many different ways to, skin a cat, so to speak.
Yeah.
So the real magic comes from not the choices, because so much of what happens is people try to like get into spoilers. Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that?
Yeah.
It's all about interpretation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to me, I kind of look, everything with me is music. And so I always think of it like jazz standards. It's like people have been playing Stardust like for 45, 50 years.
Yeah.
But every version sounds different. Or like, John Coltrane's My Favorite Things, or In a Sentimental Mood. I mean, how many different bad versions of that have been played?
Yeah.
When someone like John Coltrane, does it, it elevates it to something else and something different. And so it's about interpretation.
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing. It's like we use the comic books as the jumping off point, but then at the same time, we don't really know exactly how things are going to come out. We just try our best to try to reinterpret them in ways. And so, that's why I don't really feel, even though people in Marvel, I'm sure the snipers like, oh my God, I can't believe that you're saying you're going to do this. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's like, even if you think that we're doing some of the things that we're going to do, it doesn't really mean anything because the interpretation will be so different that by the end, it's going to feel fresh anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we kind of come at it with a bit of a slightly different way than a lot of reviewers do because we don't watch ahead. We record our episode by episode coverage as well. So we don't see the full finished product when we're talking about each episode. So a lot of the time we're kind of just trying to piece together where the show's going to go, so it's loads of fun doing it. Thanks so much for the compliment. That's really nice of you to say. It's something that we've obviously been working on the podcast for 4 or 5 years now, and it's been so much fun doing it, but getting the three of us together and having us
absolutely
being able to talk about it has been great fun.
And thanks so much. And I mean, actually, thank you for doing a really interesting and I think unique take, of these Marvel Netflix. Everyone brings something different, but just like how the music is such a large part of the show, we've tried to do kind of individual opening themes for our own podcast, and one of our friends who does blues, we got him to try and sort of do that, and so seeing some of the blues acts and all the different types of music, it's just fantastic.
Great. Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
And it also makes it fun. Like, God, if you'd done a terrible season and we'd had to talk about it for an hour every episode for 13 episodes, we couldn't live with ourselves. So thanks for doing a really good season.
Well, thank you. I mean,
right.
Although, the one thing I've learned is that you can't please everybody.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And that's the hardest part because, we put our heart and soul into these shows. Mm-hmm. And the gift and the curse of Twitter is that on one hand, it's great to hear what everyone's thinking. Mm-hmm. The curse is that you try to defend yourself to what everyone's thinking. Yeah. And you guys have probably seen my Twitter feed. I tend to engage. It's part of it for me is fun. So, I'm like Candyman. If you say my name 3 times, I'm coming. I'm here I am. What's up? And so. Yeah. I think sometimes it surprises people that I actually interact on that level. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think that every mistake, I think that every road that doesn't quite work is an opportunity to try to fine tune things differently if you get another go around.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, even when though sometimes the feedback can be painful, I use it differently than most do because being a former music critic and having written reviews, I have a different viewpoint on reviews than I think other people do to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And so I can always tell when someone is just they have an agenda. I can always tell when someone is just okay, they watched the 3 of them, they skipped around, mm-hmm. and then you can tell the people that really have thought about it and they just don't agree with your viewpoint, but that is so, it's so ingrained and so heartfelt, even if it's harsh. It's so well written that you can't help but think about, okay, let's look at what they're saying and let's see if in rethinking how we're going to do this season, if incorporating that and using it like notes, the way that we would use notes from, say, for example, from Netflix or from Marvel. Mm-hmm. And that's really what happened in terms of, I've talked about this in the press, where Angelica J. Bastian's, pieces that she did for New York Magazine.
Yeah.
Or I think Vulture. Just really had because some of them were scathing, but they were just so well written. I was just like, man, this is great. Although this is terrible. It was kind of this thing, but it helped us because the top of season 2, I literally printed them all out and distributed them to the writer's room and said, okay, let's look at this. And rather than being hurt or defensive, let's think about what she's saying. And so that was one of the things that came out was she said it's, I think it was one of the first reviews. She said it's a shame that no one bothered to really think of Luke Cage as a man rather than as a hero.
Right.
And so, on one hand, you get defensive because you're like, okay, I've got all these mandates to establish Luke Cage. I have to establish Luke Cage differently than was established in Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
And you're trying to establish the world. And then at the same time, even though you've got fans that are so deep into canon, like they can't. There are going to be some fans out there that are just pissed that he's not wearing a tiara, a chain belt, and a yellow shirt, like anytime. Yeah. And then once you get past that, you have people that they just want to see a literal translation of what they're reading in the comics put on screen. And so there are ripple effects with all these connected universes. So, for example, it's like in the comics, Reva Connors is Luke's girlfriend, and at the same time had some kind of relationship with Stryker, aka Diamondback.
Yeah,
and basically Luke gets framed with drugs and for her murder, and that causes this whole thing. Well, mind you, I can't do any of that because of the fact that Reva was introduced in Jessica Jones. And she was part of the program that, basically created Kilgrave.
Yeah.
And so already you're like, whoa, okay, so like
his origin story is off the table kind of thing. Yeah.
That origin story is off the table.
Yeah.
Like, if we're going to use the Diamondback thing at all, how are we going to reintroduce that? We can't use the thing where Luke Cage, is from Harlem and is a former gang member who's kind of coming back, and that's off the table.
Yeah.
And so then you begin to ask all these different questions as to, okay, how can we establish Luke Cage and what he's about? And then at the same time, still introduce the elements of the comic that people are going to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so, part of its tone. So, are we going to run away from the blaxploitation, sweet sister, sweet Christmas of it all? Or are we going to embrace it in a way that makes sense in the 20th century? And so, of course, we did the latter because all blaxploitation is African American characters being able to act and react in the same way that their white counterparts do.
Right. Yeah.
If you go to the poster from of Shaft back in the 70s, it said, hotter than Bond, cooler than Bullet.
Nice.
And so essentially it's this Richard Roundtree getting to kick ass, kiss a girl, drive a car. Like, it's basically they're saying we want to take the James Bond, template and put it in an African American context, down to having an iconic theme song.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Down to having a certain swagger in terms of how he's approaching everything. I mean, it's like Shaft is basically Bond without a budget.
Yeah.
And a leather coat, but like a lot of the same kinds of like, and now really very dated, kind of chauvinistic viewpoints. But, for its time, it was revolutionary.
Yeah, of course.
And, what the influence on the comics, of course, is that, the Marvel offices in the 70s were very close to Times Square. And so you had all these young writers that are walking past, if I don't know if you've seen the HBO show, The Deuce.
No, actually, no.
Oh, it's an incredible show. It's really, but it's set in the New York of the 70s of Times Square, and when it was really very seedy, very, Scorsese Taxi Driver.
Okay, cool.
Like that's real. Like Taxi Driver actually captured like what it used to be like back then.
Yeah.
The Deuce is kind of an extension of it, but imagine that environment of what Hell's Kitchen, which is that area around Times Square in New York. That's where Daredevil comes from.
Yeah.
That's where, the ideas of, okay, you're walking down 42nd Street and you're seeing all these people lined up to wait to go see Shaft. And you're like, wait a minute, like, we don't have any black characters, and this blaxploitation thing is really taking off. So why don't we have our own version of that? Yeah. And that's how a character like Luke Cage is born. And so, you want to keep that energy, but you want to update it. And so basically kind of get back to the question. It's like you have all these different things happening and you're trying to do that. And so sometimes you forget, okay, how am I thinking about this character? How am I thinking about making sure that the human moments are balanced with the superhero moments?
Yeah. And
we collectively as a writing staff, of course, are constantly in the first season trying to establish the world and trying to establish the marvel of it all. But then at the same time, creeping past some of these character moments, and that's really, what a second season is about. Second season is all about once you've established the world and once you've established kind of the premise. Season 2 is all about character, and that was really why for season 2 we were able to really go really deep into who Luke Cage was, and really, frankly, introduce flaws in Luke Cage, which was something that Mike Coulter, was really excited about.
Lovely, yeah, I'm sure. Talk about that a little bit, Cheo. In regards to taking on season 1 of Luke Cage, you came into it from doing a lot of episodes of Southland. I believe it was kind of your big break. You come in to take over the showrunner as a show like Luke Cage. You're effectively setting up the biggest black-led show on television at the time. Now, coming into season 2, you have things like Black Lightning. You've had Black Panther this year as well. So, huge change of experience probably for you from season 1 to season 2.
Well, kind of getting to my origins. I mean, the first television show I was staffed on was Southland, and so I was on Southland. Then I was on NCIS Los Angeles.
Yes.
Then I was on Almost Human for probably for 7 of those 12 episodes. Yeah. And then it was interesting. Like I got traded to Ray Donovan and essentially Joe Henderson, who went on to create and run Lucifer. Took my place on Almost Human. Wow. But it was on Almost Human that I made a lot of connections in terms of people that ended up coming on to the Luke Cage staff, like Matt Owens, who was an assistant at the time. Yeah. Brian Farley, who is our script coordinator, also is from that camp. I mean, because all these different writers' rooms are basically like circuses, and someone's like, "Hey, do you know somebody that can juggle knives?" Yeah, I know this guy. Or I mean, and that's how writers' rooms are built. It's like every single room you form relationships that lead to other connections later on. So the final room that I was in before working on Luke Cage was Ray Donovan.
Right.
And I was on that show. Ann Bitterman, who created Southland, also created Ray Donovan. And so that was kind of my finishing school to a certain extent. Because with Ray, you have an iconic midlife crisis male who is trying to navigate this space between what society considers morality and his own personal morality. And at the same time masking a deep wound with which is the prism through which he looks at the rest of the world. Right. And so with Luke Cage, coming off of just being around Ann Bitterman and David Hollander and Michael Tolkien and Ron Niswanger and Brett Johnson. I mean, all of whom are just incredible with character and incredible with with that kind of nuance. And Ann is, when you talk about world building, and I saw her world build on Southland. I saw her world build to an even bigger extent on Ray Donovan. Yeah. Having witnessed all of that, it gave me a huge, I don't want to say boost, but it gave me perspective on trying to do the same thing with Luke Cage. Right. Yeah. Because one of the things that Jeff Loeb, who beyond being the president of Marvel Television, is in his own right an incredible storyteller. Because if you've read his comics the way that I have, his comic writing, I mean, he's one of the, although Jeff will probably get mad about me saying this, he's definitely one of the lions. He's definitely one of the most influential comic book writers ever. Without a doubt. And then the other thing that's interesting with Jeff is that because he's also been through the television gamut, he was on the writing staffs of Heroes, Lost. So when you talk to Jeff, you're talking not only to somebody as an executive who understands what writers are going through. At the same time, he's been on writing staffs. He's been on some legendary writing staffs. Yeah. And talking story with him is always, from the very beginning, it's always been a very, incredible experience. One of the things that he always said, and it was something that in one of our first meetings that always stuck in the back of my head, is that he said that all Marvel characters view their powers as a curse. There's nothing happy about where their powers came from. And if you remember that, it always gives you a perspective on who they are and what they want and where they're going, which is really the most important things, to understand for a character. Daredevil, perfect example. It's like he's got the tragedy of his father's murder, in addition to the fact that, being blinded and the senses. There was nothing pretty about what happened. Jessica Jones has, in terms of how she got her powers, there's incredible tragedy with that. Luke Cage being framed for a crime they didn't commit and then it happened to him, in prison, and then coming out with these powers that he didn't want.
Yeah.
And then added to that, taking the backstory that Melissa Rosenberg created in Jessica Jones and saying, okay, it's like you've got this character who has powers he doesn't want, who isn't naturally heroic because he wants to lay in the cut rather than kind of come out of the shadows.
Yeah.
And he's haunted by finding out that the woman that he loves, wasn't necessarily upstanding, and he's in love with another woman who murdered that woman. Yeah. So that's some shit, And so essentially going past that, okay, so how do you start Luke Cage? And for me, it was hard because when I first came on, the first thing that happens after you, of course, you sign away any real secrecy that you have, in order to even join the Marvel universe. Yeah. The first thing they do is they give you, or at least the first thing that happened with me, because this was really in the early days, they gave me the shooting scripts for the first 2 episodes of Daredevil and the first 2 episodes of Jessica Jones. Right. So it was Drew Goddard's first 2 scripts for Daredevil, for, episode 1 and episode 2. Yeah. Or as we say in our parlance, 101 and 102. And it was the same thing in terms of Melissa's first 2 scripts for Jessica Jones. And I read those 4 scripts and I immediately wanted to quit. They were just so good. Yeah. I mean, and mind you, everyone now has seen the episodes, and the episodes themselves are just brilliant and beautiful. But the experience of reading those, it was just like, this thing, if they pull it off, it's going to be different than any superhero show that's ever happened in both cases. Like, this is graphic novel. This is like next level. Yeah. And I'm like, man, okay, with Daredevil, you've got Kingpin. With Jessica Jones, you have Kilgrave. With Luke Cage, you've got Stiletto. You've got Goldbug. You've got basically, if you read Heroes for Hire or Hero for Hire at the time before it became Heroes, there's all these one-off villains. There's no definitive villain. Yeah. And so at first, after reading those 4 scripts, it's terrifying. You're like,
what do I do?
And then you realize, wait a minute, okay, you have, let's step back and think about this. What are the real dramas you have? Well, you've got the drama of being a black man in America. Yeah. Because that has its own struggles, triumphs, and challenges on a daily, hourly basis. Yeah. So, okay, let's look at that. And let's look at having bulletproof skin and being bulletproof when black men are being shot systematically by the cops and also neighborhood situations on a daily basis. How does being bulletproof change the ecology of a neighborhood? Yeah. Okay, so that's one. Yeah. The second thing that happened is that we early on had a conversation with Joe Quesada, because I was always assuming that, okay, we were going to just basically put Luke Cage in Hell's Kitchen or maybe The Village, because at the time, if you look at Alias's comic, it's like she's kind of in Hell's Kitchen, but she could be in The Village. Yeah. I don't know if you know New York City at all. Yeah. So I figured, okay, that's where we're going to place Luke Cage. And then Joe was like, well, the character's from Harlem. Why not shoot it in Harlem? And that was like, oh man, for me, that was just manna from heaven, because that meant that musically, that meant historically, we could basically use the show as a Trojan horse to talk about African-American culture in addition to superhero stuff.
Yeah. And you really have used Harlem as a character
definitely.
in the show. It's been fantastic watching it, because it makes us as international viewers really want to go visit and see the place.
Exactly.
It's fab. And it's definitely an incredible place to film and also to visit, if you have a chance to come to New York City to see it. And so then that, and then the third thing was, okay, it's like, the third thing I realized was that we had a distinct advantage, because when you have an iconic villain like Kingpin, you can only fail. Like, they were lucky that they found the perfect Kingpin in Vincent D'Onofrio. Oh, yeah. Like you, just in terms of his heft, in terms of him, the bald head. I mean, he's perfect. Yeah. it's like what Frank Miller and Klaus Janson, did on the page. It's like you can only fail. You can only either capture that or, good luck.
Yeah.
In terms of what Melissa did in interpreting Brian Michael Bendis' world for Jessica Jones, it's like Kilgrave is in the way that he reinterpreted that character.
Yeah.
There's so much story that's there. It's like you're just trying to live up to that. What I realized with Luke Cage is that, okay, it's like, people haven't thought about Cottonmouth in 40 years.
Yeah.
People haven't thought about Black Mariah in any real way in a long time either. And so what it gave us is it gave us the opportunity to redefine villains within the context of this quote unquote more realistic take on the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Grounded take. Even though I hate that word grounded because
they're superheroes.
Yeah, exactly. But and then all of a sudden in talking myself back into it, I'm like, okay, like there's a great opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so rather than be afraid of these challenges, let's embrace them. Let's go at it. And so then that was the thing was, I was lucky enough to be able to attract, Charles Murray and Aida Kroll and Kayla Cooper and Christian Taylor and Jason Horwich and Nathan Jackson. Everybody to this first staff.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about that was that collectively, the great thing about a writer's room is that you're not alone.
Right.
And that, everybody is just as passionate about the characters and everybody is just as passionate about, exploring this world and building this world. And that was the thing that was so great was, me always being a geek. I called our writer's room the danger room, like X-Men.
Of course.
The reason for that is because what makes the X-Men unique is when they fight people, you never know which combination of powers is going to get you to winning. So is it going to be Nightcrawler picking up Logan and bamfing closer to the Sentinel so that he can slash it?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Colossus picking up, Logan again for a fastball special? Is Kitty Pryde going to phase somebody through something to do something?
Yeah.
Is Storm going to, shoot a lightning bolt off of Colossus, which is then because he's metallic? Is that going to then do something else?
Yeah.
And so that's what you do in a writer's room. It's like, everyone has different moments and ideas. And so, a Kayla Cooper will have an idea, and then Aida will have an idea. Charles always brings interesting perspectives to everything because Charles and I were kind of like, Xavier and Magneto. Like, so we're,
Excellent.
We always kind of, but not in a dissonant way. It's just that, like, we have different perspectives. So it's like, I always say, being a showrunner, you have to be Charles Xavier because you're in a room and you have to kind of basically read everybody's mind and, trying to figure out, okay, like who's going to bring out what piece.
Yeah.
And you're basically cultivating the conversations as everyone collectively is building from a structural and a dialogue standpoint what the season is. I'm also a huge fan of American football. Although, it's still the same thing. I mean, whether it's American football or whether it's what we call soccer, or you guys call football, offense and defense.
Yeah, we enjoy the NFL too. We have a Carolina Panthers fan and a Baltimore Ravens fan.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for both of you.
We'll get there. We got the best dressed quarterback in the league.
But the thing is one thing that I always kind of because my college roommate David Shaw he's a college football coach. I went to Stanford University, as did he. We were at Stanford together, and so watching him coach, I always I'm obsessed with coaches because coaches deal with trying to put a game plan together. There's a lot of personalities in the coaching room in terms of all the different positions, and then you're just trying to come up with a game plan for the players to run off of. And if you look at in football, they call the offensive and defensive plan a script.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do with the writers' rooms. We put together the script that our quarterback, Mike Coulter, is going to go with, and everyone, and then it's just a lot of the back and forth. And so what we did is well, the way that I stock a room is, for me, conceptually, offense is dialogue, defense is structure.
Right.
And so you've got people in the room that are incredibly good with structure. You've got people in the room that are really snappy with funny dialogue and moments. And then it's just, you just put it all together. And you know, that's kind of how the first season came along, is just us, you know, putting together a game plan. And that's the first part.
Yeah.
And then you cast.
And then you layer in actors like, you know, obviously Alfred Woodard as Mariah Dillard, absolutely amazing. Mahershala Ali as Cottonmouth, you know, stunning performance from that character. And then he's gone after episode 7, and you've got the show turning on its heels and being on the shoulders of Mariah Dillard as your new villain, really. I loved that choice in season 1 to have her in the background of those 13 episodes, and by the end becoming the villain, that everybody was paying more attention to the noisier boys in the room, we'll say. And then you find that Mariah is the one that's going to be in control of Harlem in the future. You know, it's a beautiful choice. Really, really nice choice.
Oh, well, thank you, because I mean, I get shit on a daily basis for killing Cottonmouth, but the whole way that happened is funny, because in my very first story pitch, even before the room was assembled, when I was kind of just talking to, you know, Jeff and Kareem Zrake, and then on the you know, Netflix level, you know, Cindy Holland and Ali Goss and Allison Engel and Chris Henningman. You know, one of the first things I said is that we want to have a twist where we're going to make everybody think that the big bad is the big bad until we kill him and introduce a new big bad. And Jeff loved that immediately, because he said, hey, that we haven't done that before. Yeah. The thing was, and this is the interesting part, we start casting. And at first, I'm thinking that, like, per the comic books, that Cottonmouth's going to be an older character. And so we're looking at African-American male characters in their late 40s, early 50s. So we're looking at, you know, Dennis Haysberts of the world. We're looking at Ving Rhames, both of whom as being so incredibly talented are already, they're booked. There's not even a question. And then what was interesting was that Ron Cephas Jones auditioned for Cottonmouth.
Oh, really? Wow.
And had a very interesting audition. Actually, you know, Matthew Lopes, who ended up writing episode 4 and co-wrote episode 11 of season 2. At the time, he was our script coordinator, and wrote that audition scene. And this is kind of very Tarantino-esque kind of like meditation on character that, like, they're great auditions from that piece that Lopes wrote. And Ron gave a kind of cerebral, really kind of chilling, like, it was interesting his audition. It was interesting enough where we were like, okay, he might not be Cottonmouth, but we got to keep this guy in the loop, because he's got a certain flavor. He's cool.
Bobby Fish in Harlem's Paradise. I love
it. You know, and then what was interesting, the audition that really changed everything, honestly. And here's the thing. It's like, I hope that people at some point rewatch the first season to fully appreciate Eric LaRae Harvey, because Eric LaRae Harvey, I think, is an incredibly brilliant actor. And, I think gets short shrift as people get, you know, they're angry about losing Cottonmouth, but I think because they were so angry that they didn't really look at his performance, which I thought was, as honestly as Diamondback, was brilliant. But here's the thing, was that his audition for Cottonmouth was so good. We almost cast Eric as Cottonmouth.
Really?
Okay, yeah.
And then what happened was, it said, okay, he's not older, so let's take a younger take on who Cottonmouth is. And then it was like, okay, well, wait a minute. If we are going to hold to this thing where Cottonmouth's going to be gone after episode 7, like, we're going to need somebody equally strong in its own way to kind of, you know, have his own presence. So we're like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so like, let's shift it. Let's make Eric and Diamondback, and then we still have to find a Cottonmouth. And I mean, at this point, like, everything else has been cast, including Alfre as Mariah, who we decided, you know, to keep. older and make them related as cousins as opposed to being, more in the same age, brother and sister, which I didn't realize at the time would have been very close to the dynamic that Ward and what's her name on Iron.
Joy, yeah.
So we ended up splitting the age difference, which made it different. And so we're just running out of actors. We're like, well, everyone's cast and we got a date and like, who are we going to get to play Cottonmouth?
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where we're just kind of like, okay, like, who's left? And Lorraine Mayfield, who cast all the Marvel shows, and also, of course, with her partner, also cast House of Cards.
Right.
And, it's definitely, as far as I'm concerned, best in the business. Lorraine says, well, have you thought about Mahershala Ali? And I'm like, the dude from 4400? Like, yeah, he's dope. And at the same time, it's like, I dug him as Remy on House of Cards.
Yeah.
But, Remy is just such a nurturing guy, even though he's got a cold side. I mean, he's basically a nurturing guy. He's a good guy. I'm like Cottonmouth, like, at the time I couldn't see it. But she's like, trust me, this, Mahershala is special, is what she said. And I thought about it. And then there was this interview that Mahershala did where he was talking about hip hop. And I could just sense from the interview that he really felt the music in the same way that I did. And I was like, okay. And all of us agreed, like, okay, like, we've got a great Mariah. We know that we have an incredible Luke Cage.
Yeah. We've
got an actor that's going to play Diamondback that we think is really dynamic. Simone Missick, who I'd been friends and had worked with Dorian Missick, on Southland. So it was funny because he auditioned for Shades, and then she was basically off camera reading sides to him, and then he was reading dialogue off camera for her when she was auditioning for Misty Knight. Yeah. And it was one of those things where we saw her on tape. I was like, oh my God, who is this? And then and Charles, Simone, and then boom, it's like two and two together. Like, wow.
Yeah.
It was just clear that she was Misty.
Yeah. And then to pay her back for her excellent performance in season 1, you bring her husband on board for season 2 and kill him.
But we'll get into all that juiciness in a minute. But the funny part about everything coming together was, okay, you finally, and then, okay, Charles had worked with Theo Rossi on Sons of Anarchy, and was like, Shades, like he'd be a brilliant choice, and Charles, say, hey, like, I liked his audition, and Charles was like, yo, trust me, anytime you have a chance to cast Theo. So we did. And then we get Mahershala, who didn't audition. It was one of those things, okay, like, we're just going to, we're out of time. We're going to trust his body of work. And then we got to New York, and then we got to rehearsals, and then it was past the table read when we actually, because Paul McGagan, who shot episodes 1 and 2, we shot it in blocks, meaning that we shot parts of both episodes simultaneously because we had the same director. But from the first moment that Mahershala walked on set as Cottonmouth, I think the first scene that we shot with him as Cottonmouth was actually the barbershop scene in episode 2.
Oh, right.
Okay, yeah.
Man, when he came in and he basically gave, that whole performance. Okay, mind you, like, first 2 episodes, I wrote the first 2 episodes. But when you're watching, like, particularly with the way that Paul shot and watching, like, these performances, I forgot I wrote the shit. I'm just sitting there on set. It's like this one act play, like, oh my God. And it was just the depth that he had as the character. It caused us as a writer's room. I called, the majority of the writers were still back in LA. So I called the writer's room, and I was like, yo, we got to rethink this Cottonmouth thing. Because it made me realize all of our stuff with him was almost too mustache twirly. Right. Because he was bringing such heat and so much resonance to the character. We were like, okay, we have to retone, like, everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, Mahershala is constantly asking questions about backstory. Well, why do I like music? Why am I doing this? And and the thing is, here's the secret to show running. I don't know shit, but you can never say that to an actor.
Of course.
You always have to know what's going on and have the answers because the job is you constantly get questions. And so it's something I learned from raising 3 kids. It's like, just stick to something and be confident and it'll work itself out. But so Mahershala is asking these questions about like the backstory, this and that. And then because he's asking the questions, it's making us think differently. So I'm thinking about the possible backstory of Mama Mabel. Then at the same time, Kayla Cooper and Aida are both talking about different aspects of being Black women in terms of just like, things that we talked about in the room, like color consciousness and just all these different things that are just informing character. And finally, this moment that actually, I based on, something that happened to a family friend in terms of, the tragedy of Pete's treatment of Mariah. And also what was interesting is, and this is crazy, like in the first episode, you'll notice how Jacob Vargas is saying something to Mahershala, to Cottonmouth, basically that, Uncle Pete was a good guy. And there's this one kind of offset look from Mariah. That was completely an accident.
Really?
It was just an off take.
Wow.
That we just just an angle. It was a mistake that was even in the cut. But when you look at it, like when you look at Alfre's expression when Uncle Pete's name is mentioned and she looks off in the distance, you're like, oh, like what is that? What's behind that?
Yeah.
And then of course you can just take a look. That was just an accident on set. And then there's some kind of bitterness there. What could that have been?
Yeah.
What could there have been that happened that would cause Mariah in the situation to kill her cousin? Because at first, the first way we had scripted it was very just like kind of plotty. It was like, okay, she sees a moment and she takes it. But then when we got into the real kind of deepness of it and we talked as a room about what we could do, and then we talked about this, and then in the final version, it's just like when we went on that personal level, it just took it to a whole nother level. Biggest problem of all that is we made people fall so in love with the tragedy of Cottonmouth and the tragedy of Mariah that they didn't forgive us for killing Cottonmouth. And so it kind of basically the trajectory for the rest of the season was hard because you're doing a lot of different things. 8 through 13 are to a certain extent kind of a reset, but I don't think that we understood at the time, because when you do all these things at once, and because you're not on broadcast, because you're not putting out these episodes, week after week, you have to just swing for the fences because you don't know if you're right or you're wrong. And so we end up filming this and putting it out, and then watching the reactions that first weekend of just devastated and how angry people were. That
did you take anything from that, say, with bringing John McIver and Bushmaster? Because like the thing I really liked as well with the Bushmaster was you kind of got this sense that he was going to be this, he was getting stronger and stronger, even though there was a price to pay. But then you actually kind of made who I suppose, well, at least me as an audience member at the time, thinking was going to be the big bad. And he just kind of diminishes as he moves towards the end. He kind of, it's like a reverse hero in a sense. And I really like that, how, that crowning moment where he takes Harlem's Paradise, and then soon after it just diminishes. It's like that power, I think, slips through his fingers. I think his right-hand man talks about he got to the top of the hill or something, saw the view, but he couldn't kind of retain it. It was really, really good.
Well, thank you. I mean, we planned some of that. I mean, essentially what it was is that we knew second time around that we were going to have sustained villains. But you want to up the stakes in such a way that it's not predictable. We were lucky enough to have, with Mustafa Shakir, it's like, I mean, man, he just inhabited that role in ways that, like, again, like Mahershala, like you're just like, yo. The other thing that was interesting about it was that, again, when people ask me what it's like to work for Marvel and Netflix, and what I say, and this isn't me being diplomatic. You have two very passionate companies that have an intimate knowledge of their audiences, and from that passion comes very strong opinions.
Yeah,
and part of the gift and the curse of being a showrunner is you have to navigate those opinions, know what to listen to, and also what to ignore. Because the thing is that, as it said, success has many fathers, failure is an orphan. And if you fail, if something doesn't work, it's going to be your fault.
Yeah.
And so the one thing you have to remember, it's not about being arrogant and what to ignore and what to listen to. It's just that they're not sure. They want you to have the answer.
Yeah.
And so you have to remember that sometimes. And sometimes you have to say, we're doing this, we're doing that. And the hardest part of the job sometimes is like you've got 20 to 40 people that want to go one direction. You're the one person saying, this is where we're going.
Right.
Yeah.
And, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part of the job. Thing was that initially when the whole thing with introducing Bushmaster is, we were going to basically base the season on boxing and boxing metaphors.
Right.
Okay.
One of my favorite boxing quotes of all time is Mike Tyson when he said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
True.
It's true. You to me, like one of my favorite, HBO like 24/7s was the lead up to the fight with Ricky Hatton and Pacquiao. It was such a great like documentary because it was just like you really get to know Ricky Hatton, and like there's all this backstory with Floyd Mayweather's father training him and Pacquiao being trained by Freddie Roach, and I was just so convinced because it was so compelling that Ricky Hatton was going to handle Pacquiao.
Yeah.
You get into that fight, and then when Pacquiao knocked him out, I thought he killed him. I literally thought he died in the ring, and it was the first boxing match that I let my sons watch, and they were like 6 years old. I said, "Oh my God, I cannot believe watch somebody get killed in the ring."
Wow.
But again, that's the point. Like when somebody knocks your ass out, or when you don't know what you're up against until you're there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the metaphors for the season. Okay, what if Luke finally faces somebody that can knock his ass out? And that was kind of the introduction of Bushmaster. And what we were saying is that when he's like, "Yo, I'm Luke Cage, and you can't blast me, you can't blink,"
Come on.
The initial structure was that he was going to say that, and then somebody was going to come out of the woodwork. The hip hop metaphor was like LL Cool J versus Kool Moe Dee.
Right.
It was like, if you say that you're the baddest, if you say that you're the greatest, someone's going to come out with How You Like Me Now.
Absolutely.
And that was what we were going for at first. But, Marvel and Netflix wouldn't settle for that. They're like, you have to have a better reason. You have to have a reason for why somebody's coming from Jamaica to do all this. And at first you basically, you're saying cliches, but then you just run out of excuses. Then after a while, it's like, okay, like what could be the thing that would give Bushmaster this claim to Harlem? Because he's Jamaican. How would you do that? And then, of course, the other musical metaphor, of course, was since hip hop also has Jamaican roots in terms of the interpretation of how the music is played, in terms of the sound systems and everything else. And tracing that evolution musically, and using that also as a metaphor in the show. How does this all fit together? And then you were thinking like, oh, okay. And so what it did was it forced us to come up with the backstory of Harlem's Paradise. It forced us to come up with the backstory of this betrayal. And then once we figured out what that backstory was and the connections between the MacGyvers and Stokeses and this way of kind of looking at two different immigrant experiences from the American South to the North versus the Jamaican or the Caribbean experience moving to New York, and how there's always been this kind of baked in resentment between both camps. And looking at that, and then the music and everything else, it just gave us this whole trajectory for the season. And on one hand, we understood that Bushmaster had a much deeper story. But the other part of it was that once we got into what happens with Mariah and Mariah's retaliation, once her Brownstone was burned down, we knew that, okay, we were going to have the opportunity to introduce the real Mariah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the first part was episode 9 with the twist of Tilda's real father.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after that is unpacked, it allows Mariah and her revenge to become the true big bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because after that moment in episode 10, it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. There is the constant game that Marvel fans play when they talk about the Netflix shows and the ABC shows as well, where they're trying to find who's the greatest villain in all of these shows. And really, for us, when it got to the end of that season, and we have Mariah Dillard effectively setting up her crime business in prison, and you're going, okay, well, here you go. Now you've got the best villain of all of the shows. You've had 26 episodes to set her up as the best villain. And then you do that. Then you have her daughter come in, give her a sweet kiss on the lips and leave. And that's the end of Mariah. This totally shook our hosts, as you heard when you were hearing the finale podcast.
Yeah.
Chris and John particularly were kind of going, uh-oh, what happens? Can we have her back as a ghost next season, maybe?
Yeah. Can she haunt Luke Cage for it? Like, it's just, she's such a great character. And like, Alfred Woodard, just the way she delivered it, because you felt sympathy for her. Hearing about her story about Pete, and then all of a sudden just what she was saying to Tilda, and you're just like, oh, what are you doing? And then you think she's kind of learning those skills, and then she goes, but she leaves that final, I suppose, curse to Luke Cage as well. And it's just like, what a fantastic thing. I mean, yeah, I was like shocked, but then it's like that creative choice that, yourself and, as you say, the writer's room did was awesome.
Well, it was, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, the one thing that's really important, I think the other important aspect of show running is that you have to have rapport with your cast.
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens in these situations is that, because writers tend to be very I don't want to characterize writers or stereotype writers, but we tend to kind of be insular and shy because of the nature of what we do.
Yeah. And
so as a result, sometimes certain resentments can kind of get in because it's like, I wrote it one way and you're doing it this other way. But my perspective on actors has always been different. My perspective on actors, honestly, is that like they have so much power, and that if you can figure out a way to collaborate where you can get the best out of them, sometimes that means more dialogue, sometimes that means less. But if you can figure out what that rapport is and then have the scripts match that rapport, it allows you to go places that you might not have been able to go.
Yeah.
And we're blessed with such incredible actors like Mike Coulter, like Simone Missick, like Rosario Dawson, like Theo Rossi, like Mustafa, like, Ron and Alfred and everybody, Frankie, like, I mean, everybody from character actors to the top of the call sheet, so to speak, come with their A game every day.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do is that I always talk to the actors at the very beginning and during the season about, like, what's happening. And, in particular, like with Alfred, I was just like, we're going to go places this season. And then it was funny, like we were at a restaurant. We were at Soho House in Hollywood when I was kind of talking to her about some of the things that were going to happen in the season. And I told her the Tilda revelation, and she literally screamed, and everyone in the restaurant was looking like what the hell is happening? Like, why is Alfred Woodard screaming at this table? But and then what was funny was like, as we were getting closer, she was like, I'm going to die. Right. And, and that's the point where, like, some showrunners say, never tell your actor that they're going to die, because what will happen is that they're going to start in every scene playing violins and projecting through their every motion that they're going to go. But Alfred, come on, she's been around. She's a vet. I said, yeah. And she said, okay. and she was like, what did Alfred say? Alfred said, just make sure I don't go out like no punk.
That's fantastic.
Is what she said. So it was just like, okay, like, again, we never want anyone to feel comfortable on this show. because if you feel comfortable and secure that this person is going to make it to the end in this journey, like, you know, it's going to get to the point where people are just like, yeah, you know, there's really no jeopardy because, you know, we know that they're going to get out of the ropes before the train crosses the tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like we want people to kind of feel a certain level of jeopardy. And that was one of the things about the risk, but at the same time, also the reward of completing that story is that we knew that in getting rid of Mariah in that way, it was going to be a decision that could haunt us the same way that it could, like, you know, that losing Cottonmouth also haunted us. But the reward and the fact that it basically there's so much passion that also is making you think about these characters as real people.
Yeah.
And also for what she had done. I mean, she had to go. I mean, that was, after that restaurant massacre, I mean, I was just like, Alfie that night was, I mean, because I flew out for that scene. I mean, she was transcendent. She was just like, because she was so cold.
Yeah.
And it was something about like, I think at the time she was kind of nervous about playing it like that. And I was just like, you know, the more nonchalant you play it, the scarier you are.
Yeah.
And she played that moment so, oh my God, so perfectly. I mean, Theo looked at her like, oh my God, she's crazy. He's right.
But talk about leaning into the fear. You know, you said earlier on that you spent the last 2 years getting criticized every day for killing off Cottonmouth, and then you go, I'm going to do it again with the other main character. Well done. You lean into the fear, and you sometimes get amazing results. You know. Well,
that, and also because I mean, it's interesting. It's like the same way that Mariah slowly emerges as a villain. You also have the opportunity, and we'll see if hopefully if we get a season 3, you know, to explore similar things with Gabrielle Dennis, because the way that she played Tilda, like one of my favorite moments of season 2 is that moment when she says, you know, the last Stokes just died. My name is Johnson. I was like, it was so, oh my God, it's like, it's happening again.
Yeah, it's so good.
It was one of those moments where even when you script it, when the way that she delivered that line, it was like, there's so many possibilities on book. And the thing that's interesting about her is there's good and there's the potential for else. So without being predictable, again, another character you can do a lot with.
Absolutely. I think for me, the really cold moment for Tilda is when she's effectively telling the funeral organizer that her mom's body's just going to be burnt and thrown in a hole. She doesn't care anything about her, you know. But Mariah always thought of herself as kind of the queen of Harlem and kind of expecting to see, you know, the streets lined with people crying when she died, you know. It's such a cold moment from Tilda where she's just going, no, just throw in a box and throw in a hole, you know. Fantastic moment.
Well, and that was the thing, because it made the moment when it was the coldness of the scene in episode 9 and Ian Stokes and Matt Owens' script that Clark Johnson directed for episode 9, where you get to the moment where Mariah unburdens herself with the entire story of what happened with her with Pete. And it's such a fascinating scene with Alfred, acting-wise. It was just powerhouse, because on one hand, she's making you fall in love with her perspective, but then on the other hand, you're seeing how cold she is.
Yeah.
In terms of telling her daughter that she never loved her because she can't.
Yeah.
And after that moment, she's like, I'm not Mariah Dillard anymore. And then at the end of the episode, I'm Mariah Stokes. And then in episode 10, you really understand what that really means. And interestingly enough, it's like, you know, season 1, the Cottonmouth death episode was written by Kayla Cooper and directed by Andy Goddard. And we have the same reading for episode 10 of season 2. You know, where that thing happens when Mariah makes that cold choice and everything shifts again, you know, because Mariah makes a murderous choice. You know, so it was just one of those things that just came together, you know, and that's really the most fun of the job, is that when you see these moments in the perfect pairing of the writing with the acting, and you're just kind of just watching, kind of like, you know, conducting. It's just like, man, this is wow.
Yeah. So good. So good.
I really enjoy how you bring in the historical, like in this season with, as you said, about the African Americans and Jamaican Americans and their different roots, and then the current affairs very much as well, like in season 1. Like, how important is that to bring in those those touch points of current and historical kind of references, because I really enjoyed that. Like, I actually even learnt a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, the thing is that the thing that I always think about is the fact that Netflix changed the game in terms of not just being the service, in terms of content and the breadth of and varieties of different shows and things that are on the service, but also the fact that you can watch it on your big television, you can watch it in your pocket, you can watch it on your laptop. And because it's already internet based, you can essentially treat the entire show like one big hyperlink.
Right.
And so it made me realize that, okay, it's like if we kind of hit this sweet spot where people like the show, they can rewatch the show over and over again and learn different things, because people, fanboys and girls, fan people love Easter eggs.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And so it's one thing if we have a lot of different Marvel Easter eggs, which we do throughout. And I think the one thing that our show, I pride myself on with the show is that, like, whether it's Hammer Tech or whether it's these little things that kind of like that's really just the geek in all of us saying, like, how many different ways can we like link this to other shows and other universes and everything else. But with the history, it really kind of allows you, if you're watching the show, the same way that you might use Shazam to say, okay, what song is that? It also says, okay, well, like some of these names that we're hearing, Pappy Mason and, Percy Sutton, and Google those names, and all of a sudden have a much deeper understanding of Harlem and a deeper understanding of the history.
Yeah.
And it really kind of allows you to kind of go in these really cool places. And then you can kind of see how, like, this fictional Marvel history links up with real history. And so because of the fact that Harlem's Paradise is kind of an amalgam of like Small's Paradise and the Lenox Lounge and some of these legendary Harlem clubs, and Cottonmouth is kind of personality wise, he's a mixture of like Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, but you're giving him like a musical side. I mean, you can go in so many different directions. Like, honestly, like, this is going to get me in trouble, but like, if I could ever spin the show off, the spinoff that I would do would probably be like the club, and just stay with the Stokeses, no superpowers, just like, the power struggle that is described of how, like, it was basically trying to, this betrayal between these two partners, one partner from Jamaica, one partner from the South, getting the hottest club in Harlem and trying to fend off from both the Italian mob and the and the Irish police presence. Like that in itself could just be like a whole universe. I mean, absolutely. Without superpowers. I mean, the thing is, of course, I mean, in addition to just these cool moments that you have between Luke and Danny, which of course in the comics, of course, is Power Man and Iron Fist. Yeah. That mini Daughters of the Dragon moment that you have in episode 3, at Owens' episode that Mark Jobst directed. That bar fight.
Yeah.
I mean,
so good. Yeah.
You got that great thing. I mean, the thing is that, like, it's so much fun building a world, because then you can explore these worlds. And so, like, yes, there are times, I mean, and I have to be careful, because it's what I've learned is that, like, I'm not saying there's going to be a spinoff. I'm not saying there's one in the works. we're just talking as fan people. It's like, what would be cool? Like, and that's one of the things that I think about, is just like how there's always these shows within the show, and that they're really interesting, and that's part of the fun of all of us coming together, to write these.
Exactly.
Like, what's it like having like Colleen Wing and like even the Iron Fist, like having them come onto the show as well? You were saying about like Luke Cage started there on Jessica Jones, and you're getting these other characters from another show, but you have the Daughters of the Dragon, as you say, or those touch points of say Heroes for Hire kind of aspect as well. What was it like kind of taking those characters and how you weave them in, I suppose, to Luke Cage?
Well, the thing was that we just had the attitude of, yes, we know that they're on other shows, and people are also coming off of having them together in the Defenders. But how would they act differently in the Luke Cage universe? And just being really selfish about that, like saying that, okay, it's like, we're not going to ape Defenders. We're not going to ape Iron Fist. We're going to basically take these characters and treat them differently in our book. Like the same way how, like, when you would have these crossovers, sometimes where like X-Men would appear in Fantastic Four, or, they don't quite act the same way. Or if, say, for example, like Franklin Richards is treated one way when with Fantastic Four, but when he's amongst his fellow mutants in an X-Men comic, he's completely different. It's kind of like the same kind of thing. And so, yes, the characters are, we know where they are, but we're just basically just kind of expanding them and enhancing them just for the selfish benefits of our universe. So on one hand, we're able to kind of get into a much deeper, both, Misty and Colleen, and kind of like, lay the breadcrumbs for what could become something. No hints.
That's all right. That's all right. We got some good bits of that on Iron Fist. I just want to ask that as well, because you obviously now have Simone Missick over on Iron Fist. Are you really protective of your version of the character to make sure that that they don't go against what you've set up?
Well, I mean, the thing is that, like, we're all friends. Like I said, showrunners. Like, myself and Eric Olson, who's running Daredevil, and Raven Messner, who's running Iron Fist, and Melissa, who's running Jessica Jones. And then back in the day when both Marco Ramirez and Doug Petrie were at the helm of Daredevil, and then also, of course, Stephen DeKnight, who was on when I first started working with Marvel. Like we're our own support group. Of course, can't forget Steve Lightfoot, because Steve and I knew each other from the Showrunners training program. So like we're neighbors in Studio City for years. So like we all know each other. We all talk. We talk story. We don't talk story like we into the nuances of each other's scripts, but I can always go by their writers' rooms. They can come by mine, and we can say, hey, what about this? What about that? And we're all kind of respectful. And then Jeff and the power structure of Marvel are always making sure that we're not colliding in different things with our storylines. It's just it's very kind of, I kind of liken it to what it must be like to work at Pixar. Where like, you have your own individual movies, but like Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton and all those guys that are like just in general, they talk. And so it's kind of the same thing. For Iron Fist, we just knew that we wanted to, because there was this theme of Luke's anger throughout the entire season. Like, let's talk to somebody who has to channel anger in a better way, which is chi, which is Zen. So let's have it be Danny. And let's have it be a different Danny than the Danny that we've seen in season 1 of Iron Fist. Because if in order to balance and channel your chi, you have to have focus. And so what this perspective give to a non-believer like Luke? And that was kind of the fun of this kind of, we're having like one of those 48 hours midnight run kind of like relationship between these two characters. And that was just kind of just the fun we had with the episode. And even having a character like Turk, like, because Rob Morgan is just one of my favorite people on earth. He's funny. Having that scene where he's able to to see Danny and say, hey man, your aura is dope. Who's your trader? Like wait, Turk's in a martial. Like, it's just these little things, these little moments of humor that you can just add in there. Like that sometimes you have to defend, because sometimes the powers that be are like, well, that's not room for a joke. And you're like relax, it's cool. Like it's good. And it's cool because it's Rob saying it. When Rob says it, it's funny, and then it works. Then you get to the table read and they're like, okay, yeah, it works. But it's just basically building those moments. And of course, for me, it's just like musically, like Akela Cooper's script for 10 was the Iron Fist episode was fantastic. And then from a musical standpoint, for me, it's like I knew, come on, martial arts got to be Wu-Tang.
Absolutely,
already kind of established that template. The song that I originally wanted to use was Wu-Tang Clan, Ain't Nothing to F with.
Oh, right.
In that moment, that would have just been that it would have been another internet break situation the same way that CPR was for the initial trailer. But we couldn't get it cleared.
Yeah.
But using the song that we used, I still think works really well.
It's so good. Yeah.
Because my whole thing is like, I don't care that anybody else uses Wu-Tang. It's got to be the right Wu-Tang. It's got to be the right combination of all these different things. I've been obsessed with placing music with story ever since watching the pilot of Miami Vice.
Right.
With Phil Collins in the air.
Yep.
Like, that whole thing. It's like I probably watched that one scene like every other month.
Wow.
Because every time you watch it, like you notice like little things, like whether it's the sound of Philip Michael Thomas loading the shotgun, and just the way that the music kind of creeps up at a certain point. I mean, like all the stuff that when you finally mix an episode, like you can get in all the different nuances of, you really geek out on that kind of shit. Like that's the kind of stuff I love. Or that Tarantino and Spike Lee and Scorsese use music. To form visuals. Danny Boyle as well. Like again, like huge influences that I just nakedly rip off of the show.
But they always say one of the kind of screenwriting rules is not to base a scene on a specific song, because then you won't get the rights to it. Do you write around that? Do you try and write a scene going, I'm going to use a Wu-Tang Clan song here? Or do you say, right, this is the scene, and then I'll go and find a song to fit it? Or what's your process on that?
I write the song for the scene, and if I can't get the song, I lose the scene.
Right. Right.
Because it's bespoke. It's like, or you're lucky in that, or I'm lucky in that I've got Adrian Young and Ali Shaheed Muhammad, who, because they're such powerhouse composers and musicians, and they can pull off something if I'm unlucky enough to be able to clear the moment that I'm looking for musically. But yeah, like I constantly write to music. I mean, all the time.
And do you butt heads with anybody that you've reviewed in the past and maybe didn't give them a glowing review, and now you're looking for a piece of music that? Do you ever butt heads with somebody in the industry because of that, or?
No, actually, no. But it's because of things that I've written in the past that gave me the perspective that I had when I was criticized. So, perfect example is like I wrote one of the most scathing reviews ever of the Public Enemy album, "Music in Our Message." And I mean, I called it a 13-track spiral, Dante-esque spiral in the hip hop hell. is what I call that. Or when I reviewed De La Soul's "Stakes Is High." Now here's the thing: in terms of the Chuck D record, in terms of that Public Enemy record, I still hate that record.
Right.
But the De La Soul record, I wasn't ready for.
Okay.
It was such a different musical turn that I just wasn't ready for it. And it wasn't until weeks later that I realized the awful mistake that I made, because the record is absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
But and I learned the power of a review because I essentially killed that record.
Wow.
Because I was writing for LA Times at the time, and because I was relatively respected as a reviewer, my review got syndicated.
Wow.
And was all over the place.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's one of those things where I learned, like, even you have to let stuff marinate before you write it.
Yeah.
But both perspective. But here's the thing: even though I dissed that record, Chuck D has always been incredibly respectful, and we've actually become friends.
Yeah.
And in the case of De La Soul, it's like, I'm still cool with Posthumous and those guys, that I've known the members of A Tribe Called Quest for years.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, what I've learned is that when criticism comes from a certain place, on one hand, if you're being criticized, I try to act like Chuck D.
Right.
I try to understand that people have a job and understand that job. And there might be things I don't like, but I'm still going to treat everybody with respect.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to what happened with me and De La Soul, I remember also that sometimes when people write things, they might change their mind later on.
Yeah.
They might have a different perspective.
Yeah.
given time. And so that you can't get so locked into your, disappointment or even anger about what someone's written or what somebody says that, you just kind of okay, well, it's me against them. And it just kind of goes off the rails from there.
The way we kind of approach what we do really is seeing it from the perspective of, well, there's nobody out there aiming to make something bad. That's not the intention. So we need to look at it for what they're trying to do, what they're intending to do. And I think that's the only way we can criticize things coming from that perspective, because coming at it, some people have come at certain shows with this idea that I wanted to see the comic book on screen and that's not what they delivered for me. Therefore, I don't like it and it's terrible. Would be the wrong way for us to do what we do. It would make it a very boring podcast, as I said before, if we were just criticizing things not coming directly from the comic book,
Well, that, and also it's just like, like for perfect example, like I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, like both of the books and the movies. I'm actually a Hufflepuff, by the way.
Nice.
But the thing is that if you notice with the movies, the third movie, the Alfonso Cuarón movie, is the movie where things elevated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because Chris Columbus, who, for better or for worse, did the exact adaptation of the books and put virtually every scene from the books on screen.
Yeah.
It was so static and so staid.
Yeah.
The franchise could have very easily just kind of become like Diary of a wimpy kid with superpowers. It could have just been. It could have just stayed in the kids genre, and that would have been it.
Yeah.
But then Alfonso came around for the third one. He said, "Okay, it's like let's take some departures from the books. Let's scruff it up a bit. Let's really kind of get this, and let's lean into the Britishness of it.
Yeah.
Let's have some moments that people from outside of Britain might not fully understand. Let's also kind of get deeper into the boarding school experience. Like let's really kind of do some things and interpret rather than just have directly from the books even. And then all of a sudden it's just like you saw the whole possibilities of the cinematic universe. And then also JK, to her credit, then what I love about reading the books is that every single book, the books matured with her audience.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
If people were reading the books at 9 and 10, by the time they got to the last book and they're 17 and 18, the depth of storytelling matched that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sure. And so it's really kind of the same thing. It really gave me a completely different perspective on adaptation. It's like, don't be afraid to change things.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to go there, because the one thing is that if people just want the interpretation of the comics are right there. They have the comics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They can always go back. They can always, Netflix can get pissed, but they can always shut the TV off or close their computer screen and shut their phone and go back to the comics. The comics are right there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if I just gave a translation directly of the comics, I think people in seeing that would be disappointed. I think you kind of have to try to find that balance, between both mediums to a certain extent.
And I think regardless of the way that you adapt it, it's still going to be your voice. It's still going to be you looking at the book and how you want to adapt it. If you were going to do it that way, it would still not be everybody's adaptation of it either,
Well, that's the real challenge. It's like, what do you keep out? What do you put in?
Yeah.
You've also, people don't necessarily understand, you have the limitations of budget. I think also what people don't understand is, like, people say, well, cast this person, well, cast that person. Yeah. It's like, IMDb is the best and worst thing to happen, because it's great that you can have credits and pictures of everybody at once, but then it's just not as simple as, okay, you go to put this person.
Yeah.
This. No.
Oh, fan casting. Love
it. It doesn't work like that. And because there's so many limitations in terms of negotiating a contract of who can do what, when, and how. It's just like, I mean, honestly, we're lucky anything gets made.
Yeah.
We're lucky anything gets done. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Trying to, being on the other side of that, I have a completely different viewpoint of what it takes for things to come together, as opposed to like when I was a fan, I was like, oh, well, it's easy. Well, just get this and do this and pay this. And, no, it doesn't.
Of course not.
There's so many different moments of things coming together and falling apart. One of my closest friends, a producer named Rudy Langlis. Rudy was one of the executive producers on the Denzel movie, Hurricane.
Okay, yeah.
I once asked him what a producer is, and he gave me the best definition ever. And I said, Rudy, really, what does a producer do? And he said, man, all a producer is every project wants to die on a daily basis. And the only thing a producer does is it keeps the project alive.
Fantastic.
He or she keeps the project alive. That's it.
Fantastic.
It's the best interpretation I've ever heard. And that really what this whole thing is just like, whether it's the writer's room, whether it's these networks, we're just trying to keep the thing alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's so many different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Some days are great. Some days are really difficult, but you balance it all out and you hope that you create something that people love. Because we love it just as much.
Yeah. Let's close her out with a question on what you're doing coming up very soon. I think you've got a movie coming out pretty soon that you wrote, which I know our audience will be interested in hearing about. Creed 2.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us?
The only thing I can tell you is that I'm really excited about it. Now, the reason I'm hedging is because I wrote the first 3 drafts. Then Sylvester Stallone and I, also collaborated. And then a third writer was brought in. Right. And the way that it works with the Writers Guild is that final credits still have to be determined. So as much as like I love my experience working on it, I'm not going to feel like completely comfortable saying, yeah, like it's, I wrote it until the final credits are determined.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that having had that experience, it was incredible. It was so much fun working on that movie. And regardless of however the final credits turn out, I'm proud to have written, versions of it. And, it was just so much fun. Cause I grew up with the Rocky movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Creed was such an emotional experience.
So good.
And getting the opportunity to, write for, moments with Michael B. Jordan and also for Sylvester Stallone, Rocky's now Mickey and having a new fighter and, in terms of just like the shift and also like, the one thing that I talked with Stallone about, because one of the reasons I got the gig was that he was, a huge fan of Luke Cage.
Right.
Yeah. And the one thing I said to him, I said, look, I said, like, essentially the Rocky movies are their own universe. It's like, it's reality, but at the same time, these fictional characters, and there's so many fictional characters. I mean, it's just like with the fighters and their backstories, it's like, it's the same kind of contained thing. And so there are Rocky geeks the same way that there are, comic book geeks and certain templates that have been established. And so, I basically, as a Rocky fanboy, to be able to kind of play in that sandbox was, it was fun.
So good. Yeah.
And also, the other part of the fun was when I was, co-writing with Sylvester Stallone, is we'd be talking story or we would be writing certain things, and then all of a sudden he would start doing the Rocky voice or saying things as Rocky. It would freak me out. Like I'm on the phone trying to keep my face composed. Like now, I'm like, that's Rocky.
I love it.
It's interesting because he's done Rocky for so long. It's like Sylvester Stallone is not Rocky.
No.
But then when he does Rocky, you're like, oh my God, it's Rock. Like oh my, it's he did like it's just a certain turn of his voice, and you're like, oh, like holy shit, I'm talking to Rocky Balboa.
Yeah. It must be so central to him as well, because obviously it was originally created because he couldn't get work. That's what he was doing. He was working on this script and setting up this movie for himself because he couldn't get work. So it's so central to Sylvester Stallone, and it is the reason he has a career is because of the wonderful Oscar-nominated, fantastic Rocky movie. So it must be so personal to him.
Well, that, and then I don't think Sylvester Stallone gets enough credit as a writer as well as a director, because people rarely remember the fact that he directed Rocky 2, he directed Rocky 3, he directed Rocky 4. John Avildsen came back for Rocky 5, and then Rocky Balboa he also directed. The thing about working with him is that in collaborating, writing with him, it was it was a very fun, easy collaboration, and he knows the stuff. Like he's no slouch. Like, yeah, that was what was so great, was like you're writing with him and you're like, okay, oh yeah, okay, so it makes sense. Like, yeah, like you know, this isn't a case of a star overstepping his boundaries. I mean, he literally created this interpretation of this world. And so it was one of the most fun parts of actually working on it was that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. For our fellow defenders who are listening, I just want to compliment Cheo Coker for having the Luke Cage Muhammad Ali poster right behind your head, like as if you have your own Harlem's Paradise. Fantastic choice on your wall. That obviously came from you then, that decision to have that as the first poster that Luke put up in to replace Biggie Smalls on the wall of Harlem's Paradise. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Were we right? Is he the most inspirational person that Luke Cage thinks might be able to get him through the challenges that he's going to face in the future in Harlem's Paradise?
Well, the other boxing metaphor that we use for season 2, I believe it's the Japanese metaphor. I'm not sure. If I'm wrong, please do not roast me on Twitter. I apologize. But it's this notion of fall 7 times, rise 8. And so what makes Ali my favorite boxing champion is the fact that he's not undefeated.
Yeah.
Because what it means is that those times that he lost, he risked it all and he came up short, but it didn't stop him from getting back in the ring and coming back. And I think he was actually undefeated in his rematches.
Yeah.
And also the way that he regained his title a number of times.
Yeah.
And that kind of is really, for me, the metaphor of who Luke Cage is that he will get knocked down at times, but he will pick himself up, whether it's in season 1, the whole Judas bullet thing, or whether it's season 2, it's like you get past Judas bullets and someone kicks your ass.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he gets past it. The thing that we did with the Bushmaster fights was that we kind of framed those on Ali Frazier 1, Ali Frazier 2, Ali Frazier 3.
Nice.
You know, like of just in terms of the back and forth.
Yeah.
And because few people remember that Ali lost the first Frazier fight, the one in the Garden. And then, the final, our final moment, our thriller in Manila to a certain extent was, the fight in episode 12, in the safe room,
Yeah. So
my favorite fight though was the fight that Millicent Sheldon, shot in episode 6 on the High Bridge.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. And also the fact that we got to use, Bob Marley's Sun is Shining, and, in that cool way. But and also using that was the Lee Scratch Perry version of it. So it's got a certain grit to it, that was different than the one that Bob Marley re-recorded years later, I think on Kaya.
Yeah, absolutely. John, any last questions for?
Just one, I suppose, and that comes up to the High Bridge actually, with that fight, because Bushmaster uses a little bit of magic powder, or sort of kind of that voodoo reference, I suppose. I'm a massive Doctor Strange fan. I was kind of thinking, was this idea of bringing a mystical side to Luke Cage through John McIver and the McIver family and the journey he had to go through? And certainly for me, I'd love to know your thoughts on possibly bringing Brother Voodoo into Marvel Netflix. That earthy magic was really cool. I was really surprised by it actually as well.
Well, the one thing that we avoided was actually using any real, anything real, like any real voodoo, any real OBS or anything like that. We definitely, even though we had some visual references, we stayed away out of respect to those religions. We kind of stayed and kept things kind of vague and mystical to a certain extent. The same way that, for example, people have asked questions about Bushmaster's fighting style, saying, well, hey, it's, he's Jamaican, but he's using a Brazilian fighting style of capoeira. But my whole thing was like, okay, we're talking about a fighting style that came directly from, slaves freeing themselves. So we're getting criticism on using this fighting style rather than using an Asian martial art, where the whole thing that we're trying to say is that it's kind of a mixture of not just capoeira, but it's also, if you're extending the metaphor, of the Maroons and of, people that freed themselves and the fighting styles that they had to mask to make it look like a dance, which everything capoeira, breakdancing also is influenced by capoeira,
right,
as well as it's influenced by Asian martial arts. And so just kind of mixing things up. I mean, what we want to do, and it's also the thing that happens with the other Marvel series, like when they kind of talk about some of the more spiritual elements of the hand. It's the idea of ancient magic, and of magic really being science before it had a name, and kind of the combination of both, because our technology would seem like science to people that weren't exposed to it,
right?
And so, coming from that perspective of doing it, it's really more about that than it is about anything specific. Although what's cool about the characters that you mentioned, whether it's Stephen Strange or Brother Voodoo, is the fact that in the Marvel universe you have these mystical connections to other alternate universes and everything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think John's just waiting for that moment where Luke Cage walks past the Sanctum Sanctorum in the middle of the city, or sets up shop there as the Defenders come back together or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Someday, John, someday. Cheo Hodari Coker, thank you so much for joining us. I know we've taken up so much of your time, and I think we could talk for another 2 hours. We didn't even get to ask you about DW, our favourite new character on the show, who was fantastic throughout the season. And by the end of the season, we were just totally feeling his heart on the screen. I don't know how you did it from a character that was a funny little throwaway gag at the beginning, and then come to the end of the season and love him.
Okay, well, this last thing.
Okay.
Jeremiah Kraft plays DW, and literally he just had that one line, that kind of funny thing that I'd written for him in the pilot for Luke Cage, and he was so good. It was just like, we got to figure out a way to bring him back, DV. And then finally, when we filmed the finale of season 1, the Clark Johnson finale.
Yeah.
We had a moment that I fought so hard to keep in, but ended up getting cut, where before Luke and Claire walk away and he's filming them, and then he puts the camera down and he says, the brother needs discretion, and he puts the camera down.
Yeah.
We had another moment where they kept talking, where he said, "What's your name, kid?" And he said, D.W. Griffith. Have you ever seen the movie Birth of a Nation? And Luke says, "No." He says, "Don't." And they walk off. And it was just this cool moment where you would have actually heard him say his full name and everything. Yeah. But that ended up getting cut. But then that was the thing, was from that moment, okay, it's like, we didn't start off with his character being DW, but okay, here's a way, by naming this character after this character, that we can bring him into the full canon of the Luke Cage universe. Yeah. And so then for season 2, we just extended it. Like, okay, so now we can bring him into the shop, and now he's trying to monetize being Luke's chronicler. Of course, off of our boxing metaphor, by making him Howard Bingham,
Hype man.
It just became this thing where it's like, you can understand how you have this kid who's videotaping him and documenting who Luke Cage is. And, plus, I mean, Jeremiah is he brings so much energy and so much fun. Yeah. Like, he again has become, another character that we now, think about in a cool way. The same way that also, like, Sugar. That was, again, when Sean did that, Sean is an old friend. We actually worked together on the movie Notorious. He played Suge Knight in Notorious.
Yeah.
One of the interesting Easter eggs of that scene is that the guy that punches Luke, breaks his hand on Luke's chin. Yeah. He played Suge Knight in the movie Straight Outta Compton.
Really?
Sean, who played Sugar, played Suge Knight in Notorious. Wow. So they call themselves the Two Shugs. Nice. And so the thing was that when Sean had that line, I don't even like these niggas, man. Like he was so, the way he read the line, it was just so funny. It was like, we got to find more things for this guy to do.
Yes.
And there were so many opportunities over the last 2 seasons to kill him off.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I can never do it. Because like, we just loved, we loved him,
Excellent.
you know? And so as a result, it was funny, like, you find these moments where you can make a character deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had this moment where, okay, it's like Sugar in this weird way, and Luke going in this potential new direction could kind of become his new, his new Bobby Fish.
Yeah.
And it just works so well in that last episode, even down to that moment where, like, he walks up to him and he's almost like his valet, and he like whispers in his ear, and you kind of see it kind of becoming like a combination of Tom Hagen and Neary.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and of course, like, you know, it was just funny because I'm such a huge Godfather fan. Like the fact that we were able to kind of set up that shot where the door closes on see the same way that it also closed on Kay. It was like, if you're a fan of those movies, I know people go, oh my God, like, you know, it was the same shot and everything. Like it was like Alex, it was great.
So good.
You know,
and you've also got DW set up as the new Pops now, hopefully. If we do get a season 3, we have a new Switzerland possibly being created in Ireland.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Of course.
The only thing I will say is that Jeremiah Kraft is a great actor, and I enjoy working with him. Is the Hollywood
good stuff.
Way that I would say it. Although it's funny though, it's funny when we're talking about killing people off. I was on a panel with Frankie Faison recently.
Yeah.
And Frankie is the only character that's been in all 4 Silence of the Lambs movies.
Yes.
And I joked on stage. I said, you know, you survived 4 Hannibal Lecter movies and only 2 episodes of Luke Cage.
Love it. Once again, I'll say thank you so much, Cheo Hodari Coker. Hopefully our fellow Defenders have enjoyed listening to your discussion about season 2 with us on Defenders TV podcast. Hopefully you will also get confirmation soon of Luke Cage season 3, and you'll come back and join us and chat to us again about the next season, or anything at all, really. You've got our phone number now, so.
Absolutely, and also if you go back and edit this and it's all complete nonsense or just me rambling, and you guys have more specific questions, and then let's do this over again so I can actually just answer the questions instead of just rambling.
We loved listening to the discussion,
great.
and I'm looking forward to listening back to it, to be honest. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will hopefully talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Massive thanks. Really good. Thank you.
No, and thank you just not only on behalf of Luke Cage, but also on behalf of all of the other Marvel Netflix shows. I mean, I'm definitely going to turn on the other creators to this podcast if they haven't already listened to it, because man, it's like you guys get so in depth on every single episode. It's mind blowing. You know, thank you so much.
No problem.
And I know that all of our writers fully appreciate it. So, and just on my behalf, thank you so much.
Cool.
No problem at all. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing what you got coming next.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Fingers crossed. Thank you again.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
Take care, Cheo.
Have a great day.
You too.
And that is our interview with Cheo Hodari Coker, the showrunner of Marvel's Luke Cage on Netflix. Really fun interview. Really, really enjoyed that. Thanks again so much for joining us, Cheo Coker. And thanks to you, fellow Defenders, for joining us for this discussion about season 2 of Luke Cage. We're still cracking on with our discussions about Iron Fist. Still have a couple of episodes left of that show. And if you want to join us for our next podcast about the Marvel Netflix shows, Daredevil will be coming up in October as well. So lots and lots of discussions about each individual episode of the Netflix shows. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you stay subscribed to the podcast through our website at defenderstvpodcast.com. You'll have connections to all of the podcast sites that we're on, including Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts as well. Talk to you soon, and we'll leave you with our usual Luke Cage theme from Mississippi McDonald.